here. We have Janis and Deb are both here today as well. So if you want to get us started, that'd be great.
All right, thanks Joel for the cue. Nice to see everybody, or at least many of you. There's so many people on the call today that I can't see everybody on one screen. I guess that's good news. Lots of interest in the workshop, which I'm not surprised by. We're going to be privileged to hear from Gemma Mendez Smith and others on the call as we go along, so we'll get into it. So welcome to this installment of the Perth-Huron Not-for-Profit Call. These calls are hosted by the United Way and the Social Research and Planning Council. We began these calls actually as a response to the pandemic, and look where we are. We're still meeting, and we still have a pandemic. So anyway, that's interesting. But I hope everyone can learn a lot today on the call. I know I'm looking forward to the content that we have here today. So we do officially make this also a part of our Keys workshop series. So every year, the United Way for a long time has been offering Keep Educating Yourself workshops. And so we've kind of brought those two things together, the not-for-profit call and Keys. So you can keep up with our nomenclature if you want. It doesn't really matter. We're just here to enjoy each other's company and walk along. We're scheduled today from 10 to 2, and I hope you can enjoy the call for the duration. If not, it is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website. As is our custom, so that people can know who each other are on these calls, we would appreciate you entering your name and your organization that you're with. If you have an affiliated organization that you're with, in the chat box, and you can do that by clicking on the emoticons at the bottom and finding the chat feature and typing it in. So that would be great if you don't mind. That way we have a record of who has come, and perhaps you will see each other on the call and know who's here. It's just so many folks on the call today that we couldn't possibly do introductions with everybody. But with that in mind, I want to make sure that everybody understands that we do have these calls periodically, and if you have any questions or concerns, or you want to invite other people to them, you can work with Lauren Thompson. I'm sure she'll pop her name in the in the chat function as well from our staff here, and she's the one that organizes much of the logistics behind the scenes, and we will go from there. So as far as early introductions here, we want to begin by introducing our friends from Libro, and I think Deb Finch is on the call, and so Deb, please jump up and share why Libro is funding this workshop.
Thank you, Ryan. So good morning, everyone. I'm Deb Finch, Regional Coordinator for Libro Credit Union in Huron and Perth counties. Libro has been a proud supporter of seminars like this one for many, many years. A little bit about Libro. We are a financial cooperative focused solely in Southwestern Ontario. Our purpose is to grow prosperity in Southwestern Ontario and in our communities by transforming banking. Community is important to Libro. The regional economy matters, and our individual and collective successes support one another. That's the cooperative approach and our social purpose. And speaking of social purpose, Libro is a B Corp. B Corps are businesses that balance profit and purpose. B Corp is a global community of leaders driving a global movement of people, using business as a force for good. At Libro, we use our business as a force for good. We understand that through our products and services, operations, business practices, partnerships, and collaborations, that we can impact our communities in a positive way and help address some of the most challenging issues in Southwestern Ontario. We've identified 4 Libro pillars as the key areas that we focus on to deliver our promise to grow prosperity in Southwestern Ontario. These are employment, increasing productive employment and decent work for all, reducing talent shortages, and supporting key business segments such as agriculture and small business, including social enterprises and cooperatives. The next pillar is financial resilience, improving financial capacity, and resilience of people, businesses, and organizations like all of you. Local food accessibility is a pillar where we strive to improve food systems to increase access to local food for everyone. And the 4th pillar is housing, enhancing access to adequate, safe, and affordable housing for all. All of these pillars are very much aligned with the values of United Way, One way we can support like-minded organizations is through our grants, sponsorship, and partnerships program. Some recent examples of organizations we've supported include the Gateway of Center of Excellence for Rural Health, the Godridge Community Gardens, the local community food center in Stratford, ShelterLink, the technical training group, as well as both Optimism Place and the Huron Women's Shelter. There are a number of different sponsorship levels, and I encourage you to find out more information on our website at libro.ca.
Thank you, Deb. Appreciate you introducing Libro, and we're so grateful for your longstanding partnership that makes presentations like today possible. We also have with us Janis, who's here from investStratford and is also supporting today's call. Janis.
Pesky mute button. Good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm Janis Auster. I'm the Operations and Administration Lead for investStratford here in our community. I am a white cisgender female settler, originally from Rome, New York. That is in the heart of the United Nations territory, and I have come to Stratford by way of New York City, the land of the Musini, Lapini, and Wappinger territories. And I believe it's important for me to recognize my placement in these lands, as it helps provide context for my own journey in this work and discovery and recognition. investStratford is the economic development arm for the city of Stratford. And so we do a lot of work in the community, and we believe that in our organization that equity, diversity, and inclusion are key to a better community, and recognize the work that needs to be done here. We are at the same time happy to support this work and sad that it is necessary. And I look forward to learning along with you all today. That is what I have to say. Short and sweet.
Perfect. We're really glad you're here. And again, express my thanks for your leadership in supporting today's workshop. We all have a lot to learn, and we all need to participate in these conversations. So I didn't introduce myself. I assume most of you know me because I've been around so long. But anyway, I'm Ryan Erb, the Executive Director of the United Way. I should say that as I move on. Next, we do want to introduce our first presenters, though. We have our friends that have come to us from the Immigration Partnership, and they're going to be sharing today about discrimination experienced by immigrants, visible minorities, and Indigenous peoples in Huron, Perth. And so I will pass it along to Kristin and team, or maybe it's just Kristin today. We'll look forward to hearing from you at this time.
Thanks, Ryan. My colleague, Mark Nonkes, is here as well, and we're both going to present to you. So thank you so much for having us today. And excellent. Thank you. So in 2021, the Huron County Immigration Partnership worked with a team of Western University researchers to produce a survey and study that investigated discrimination as experienced by immigrants, visible minorities, and Indigenous people in comparison to people who are not members of these groups. And the research was funded by Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada.
The research team called thousands of people in Huron and Perth, with 595 people taking part in the survey. Participants were asked about their experiences with discrimination, where discrimination occurred, who was perpetuating it, and how people responded to discrimination when it happened.
Among the group who answered the survey, 62 identified as Indigenous, 297 identified as a visible minority or immigrant, and 236 identified as white non-immigrants. 55% of the visible minority or immigrant category identified as both an immigrant and visible minority.
The results showed that in Huron and Perth, approximately 8 out of 10 Indigenous people reported experiencing discrimination in the last 3 years, compared to about 7 out of 10 immigrants and visible minorities, and 5 out of 10 white non-immigrants. We should note that the same survey was conducted in London and Middlesex, where findings showed that discrimination was 20% lower for Indigenous people, immigrants, and visible minorities than in Huron and Perth.
The research team asked people who reported experiencing discrimination about where it occurred, and workplaces were identified as the most prevalent place. Immigrants, visible minorities, and Indigenous people were likely to experience discrimination at their job from supervisors, co-workers, or clients. People reported often experiencing discrimination when applying for a job or promotion. For instance, we do know from broader research that immigrants who do not have English-sounding names are given fewer interview opportunities after applying for jobs. Stores, banks, or restaurants were also reported to be frequent sites where discrimination occurred.
61% of Indigenous people reported that they had experienced discrimination while using a library, a community or recreation center, or parks. This could be interactions with patrons as part of the general public, or as participants in events, or interaction with staff. We want to explore this more in qualitative research in our next steps.
The research team also identified that discrimination was frequently experienced in education settings, with 61% of Indigenous people reporting discrimination, 34% of visible minorities, and 14% of white non-immigrants. This contrast between groups was the most significant in the study.
Race or skin color, along with ethnicity or culture, were identified as the top two reasons why immigrants and visible minorities believed they had experienced discrimination. Ethnicity refers to common religious, linguistic, or cultural traits. Meanwhile, Indigenous people said their identity or ethnicity or culture were the top reasons. For white non-immigrants, gender and physical appearance were cited as the most common reasons.
Inappropriate jokes or derogatory language was identified by all three groups as the most commonly experienced type of discrimination. In addition, reports of verbal abuse, verbal threats, physical threats, damaged property, or physical abuse were reported and were significantly higher among Indigenous peoples than other groups.
The findings point to people regularly experiencing microaggressions in Huron and Perth. Microaggressions can be understood as a subtle form of discrimination and can appear harmless, be viewed as acceptable, lawful, or often they're unintentional. An example of this would be a joke about a specific group of people that you do not belong to. Oftentimes, microaggressions are something that a victim is subjected to over and over.
When people experienced discrimination, they reported feeling discouraged, excluded, or powerless, and were more likely to feel anxiety or depression because of those experiences.
Why does this matter? Understanding the lived experiences of immigrants, visible minorities, and Indigenous people in our communities, including their discrimination, is essential as we work towards creating more equity in our communities so that everyone can contribute and thrive. Experiences of discrimination and not feeling welcome in a community can contribute to the reasons why people leave an area. We want to ensure that those who are already here have positive experiences so that they stay.
The report recommends that in Huron and Perth, anti-discrimination activities should specifically target the most common forms of discrimination and be specific to the context where it frequently occurs. As the Huron County Immigration Partnership, over the next few months, we will be focused on forming an anti-discrimination task group. We would love to have representatives who work directly with newcomers to join us, and please let us know if you're interested. We imagine the time commitment would be a monthly meeting for about 3 months. We will be working with newcomers directly through our Newcomer Advisory Committee, which we are planning to restart in the next few months. And we can provide you with information that we hope you can share with newcomers to recruit members. We're also going to be promoting initiatives to report, recognize, prevent, and to reduce discrimination. We're happy to have conversations about your initiatives to address discrimination and offer any guidance as we're able. And as mentioned earlier, we will be conducting additional research by working with university researchers, and we hope to connect to folks with whom we work as we continue our research efforts. And if you want to get in touch with us, here's our contact information, and please, any questions, we'd be happy to address them right now, and we're always happy to follow up with you at any point in the future.
Sorry, I missed the first 11 minutes. Did I miss very much out of that 11 minutes?
So much. We might have to
Oh.
give you your own presentation in the future.
Okay. Sorry about that.
And the presentation will be distributed as part of the minutes too. So any questions? I know that I may not be able to actually see all the folks and the questions, but we're happy to address any questions.
Hi, Kristin and Mark. This is Sean from Libro and Wingham. I thought this was a great presentation. I've seen the one that you gave, I think a month or so ago or earlier this month at Gateway, I believe it was. But I really like the way you outlined everything. Do you do presentations for workplaces or anything like that? If I wanted to have you on like one of my team huddles or something, just to kind of outline, I thought the data was really eye-opening in a lot of cases for some of that stuff, and just, yeah, that's my thing. So I'll send you guys an email for that, but I thought it was a really good presentation.
Thanks, Sean.
And we are happy to do that. We're happy to talk to workplaces or specific organizations.
Kristin, can you or Mark talk a little bit about any surprises or what stood out for you notably?
Sure. Mark, did you want to go first, or I can?
Yeah, I think this slide where the experiences of discrimination, it's so significant as to how many people are experiencing some form of discrimination within our communities. I think it was a really stark, not even reminder, because you kind of realize that discrimination is happening in Huron and Perth, but I don't think we realize the severity of it. So that's probably the biggest piece that hit me.
Yeah, I'd echo what Mark says. And for me, a big surprise was that we were significantly higher than London Middlesex. And I assumed that it would be a bit more equal, given that in urban centers, they have so many more opportunities for or context for discrimination to take place, like on public transit. That we don't have in rural areas. So the fact that we may have those fewer contexts, but we're 20% higher, was a surprise to me. Another big kind of takeaway from the research for me was the experiences of Indigenous people. It was just always higher and more severe, and even the forms of discrimination that were taking place that Indigenous people experienced, it became so much more just a very different level. There's more verbal abuse and threats and physical threats and damaged property. So it's just very, very prevalently experienced by Indigenous people in our communities. And that was very, very sad and eye-opening.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Lindsay Whalen at Municipality of Blue Water. So you were saying if we wanted to get involved with the committee that you're putting together, who should we contact?
Contact me or Kristin, so you can just email us and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Mark and Kristin. I think this was a bit of, this is very educational and really helps us understand our situation in here and in Perth, and appreciate this work, and looking forward to the next phase of this work as well. So I think there's more to come, and more conversations to be had, but appreciate your time today, and thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
I have the privilege to introduce Gemma Mendez Smith today. So she is with the 4-County Labor Market Board. She's been with them for 19 years, and as the executive director, she's grown the organization to include program delivery through the Connects 2 Skills program. And Gemma was a panelist on the TVO The Agenda, speaking on the topic of rural immigration. And this topic is one that she is extremely passionate about, and an immigrant herself. Gemma believes in lifelong learning and recently completed her requirements to become a regulated Canadian immigrant consultant. She is now in the process of becoming registered with the ICCRC. She is deeply passionate about getting immigrants integrated into the community they choose to reside in when they arrive in Canada, and that is what prompted her to pursue her pursuit of the RCIC designate. Gemma's experience and knowledge in employer skill needs, and her experience of working with individuals to grow their skills so they can enter the Canadian labor market, drives her passion to create smooth bridging program for employers and their potential workforce. Rural Ontario is a great place to live and work, and sharing that message to others has been her goal, driven by the work she performs at the 4-County Labor Market Planning Board. So thank you, Gemma. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I will quickly share my screen. And this one, got so many screens to choose from. And there we go. So you can see my PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the, it says unmute myself. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why my screen says that, but we'll just leave it there. I will ignore it. So thank you very much for the introduction, Joelle. And it's really great to be working with the United Way on this topic. A couple of updates about me. I am actually now registered, and I have my own business practice in immigration consultancy. So I have a business that does that now. And actually, it's a tough profession. I didn't realize it was so highly regulated, but it is, and that's a good thing. We make sure that they're making sure that people get the service that they need. So exciting there. And it was quite an honor to be able to speak on the agenda. But as I was speaking on the agenda around that topic of immigration in rural communities, it really was based on me as an immigrant living in a rural community and how that experience kind of unfolded. So really great to be able to do that. The other day, as I was thinking about, as I was preparing for this workshop and talking about and thinking to myself, I always have these great ideas, sometimes great ideas, first thing in the morning. And so I wrote this down because it was on my mind, and I just kind of had to write it down. And I think of this for myself as well. So preconceived notions are our biggest failure in life. It causes us to take unfair action, particularly when we have authority or some leverage over someone else. And that is kind of how I was thinking about this. And when we talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, this is what I think about. And I always think of myself as, how do I check in to ensure that I'm not by rote, without even thinking about what I'm doing, offending or really not in a good space where it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And as a manager, it's really important for me to keep that in mind. As a service deliverer, it's important as an organization to keep that in mind. And as individuals in our organization, we really encourage people to keep that in mind as well. And when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're not just talking about immigrants or Indigenous. We're talking about lots of diversity in our community. So we're going to kind of cover some of those as we go along. And I'm listening to Kristin and Mark's presentation. And when we talk about, so today we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace. And where do we start? And I think one of our answers just came up in that presentation. 53.2% of the people that responded to the survey talked about their inequity coming from a supervisor and a coworker. So we here today, I think they're mostly managers in here, but when we talk about who else needs to know this, understand this, and understand the concepts and the practices, we really need to look at that 53.2% and think about how we're gonna get our direct supervisors and our workplace understanding how we do this and how we do this well. And, one of the things I think about regularly is we all hear the word or the phrase normal. And I've always been thinking about that. It's like, once I remember saying the word and I thought to myself, so who determined what normal is anyway? And a long time ago, our biases were created just for the way that we were raised and the things that we were taught. We were taught that differences are not normal. And so anything that's outside of our norm isn't going to be easily accepted in our atmosphere and in our area of whether we work at home, at play, in the community. So yes, there was a benchmark that was set for normal, and we haven't really questioned that until I think now. We see more and more people really questioning the operating system of what's normal and what should we be looking at as accepting as norms. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing, because even if what we determine is normal in whatever circumstance we're thinking about it, and it continues to work, then that's okay. But at least if we question the operating system around normal, we can always kind of highlight and bring to our awareness maybe the things that we need to work on. And I'm really excited that that we are becoming that type of society that's questioning things that don't feel right to us right away. So I'm going to shake things up a bit. And normally, this is going to throw you off base, but throw you off your mark, but this is going to be good. We normally wait for questions to be at the end, but we're going to ask questions now, because here's what I want to make sure that I do. If there's a burning question out there that I haven't addressed in one of my slides, but I know it up front, I will be able to kind of probably address that. So I wanted to do things a little bit differently, because normally we ask questions at the end. And I just wanted to try a little bit something different. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear what your questions are now. And I would give you a couple of minutes to either, I don't know, Joelle, how do we want to do that? People can ask their questions or they can type them in the chat. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, both would be great. So just speak up. It's hard to scroll through everybody, but just
Okay.
speak up, or if you have the ability to write your questions in chat, we can respond to those as well.
And I look like when I'm speaking to, I'm looking off to the side. It's because my screen is with your faces are on the side, and then my screen that I'm presenting on is in front of me. So I am paying attention to you. No questions? I threw you off your game, didn't I? You were waiting for questions at the end. Okay. Well,
Gemma,
yes.
sorry, Sean here from Libro.
Sure.
I just have a question about trying to attract non-white potential employees. What's the best way to do that would make them feel comfortable with applying? Because I feel like sometimes we don't always get those candidates because they might not feel comfortable in applying for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say the first thing I can think about is when we advertise our jobs, sometimes, most of the times we say experience, and it's very hard for a newcomer And even an immigrant who may be here for a long time, who hasn't had the opportunity to have Canadian experience, it is very hard for them to have confidence in applying for those jobs. And then the second part of that, and we'll talk more, I probably will cover that later on, but we'll answer the questions now and then we'll talk more deeply about it later. But I think the second thing about that is if you are an employer it's not a qualifier. The Canadian experience piece is not a qualifier. I think we need to say that, we're looking for experience, and, and when people apply for our jobs, then it's important that we demonstrate that we are living what we say. So, so for me, when I hire, I really look at skills matches. What is the job that I'm looking for? What's the skill that the individual who's applied for? And is there a match? And then, and it doesn't have to match 100%, because the idea is that I don't think anyone comes to us with all the skills that we want. We know that there's going to be training, and be open to that discussion around what skills are absolutely necessary and what skills we can say, you know what, that's okay, we can train you up. And I think we open ourselves up to be even more, we have more access to a greater labor market and a pool of people when we kind of, we're not so tight on our demands around what we need to have for an individual. And some of it is not necessary to perform the job. So we really need to think about how we're structuring those job descriptions. And something that Kristin and Mark mentioned in their presentation as well is keeping in mind that names that are hard. And I've heard not just one experience, but many experiences where people have had an experience where if their name is different, they may not be given an opportunity. And so they tend to change their names. So they will, land higher up on the interview list or something. And I have a staff person, and her name is Ting Ting Zhang. And I remember her posting on LinkedIn. She says, when I first came to Canada to study, I was told that I should get an English name. And she says, but I really like my name. So I've stuck with my name. And I'm so happy that she was able to do that. And I commend her on that, because it's a tough decision to make, because when you make a big move as an immigrant, when you make a big move, you want to be successful. And if that's something that's in your way, you tend to give it up. And for instance, for me, when I came to Canada, I was, I was a nanny when I first came to Canada, and then I did my studies, and then I ended up working at the University of Waterloo. And people, because I was frontline every day, many times a day, and I speak English, and people would ask me, what did you say? What did you say? So I would say Waterloo as opposed to Waterloo, and tease water, and and so those, and daughter instead of daughter. And, those types of things. And people would ask me, what did you say? And I got so frustrated by being asked so many times, what did you say? I dropped my Trini accent. And now I only use my Trini accent at home when I speak to my family. So it's really interesting that sometimes, and it's not just immigrants, it's anyone who feels like they don't belong to the norm, they give up and they carve away parts of themselves to fit in. And I think we're doing a disservice when we do that, because people are we want to fit in so badly. We, as the royal we, in different things that we do in our lives, we want to fit in so badly that sometimes we do give up the things that mean the most to us, because we are here to do for a purpose. And so, and I think the same of our Indigenous communities and what we've been experiencing. I've been working now with the Planning Board for 20 years. And for those 20 years, we've served the two communities in Bruce County, and that's Saugeen's First Nations and Cape Croker up in Lions Head area. And we have heard so many times over all those years that Indigenous people feel uncomfortable when they go to find jobs in the cities and off the reserve. And it's a hard story to kind of hear. And here we are, in my experience, 20 years later, and we're still hearing those stories in our communities. So, this is a good time to be talking about those things and thinking about how we might change things. So, just a few things that I've experienced. It's not paying attention to names, not paying attention to where somebody gets the experience, as long as it's not, of course, a technical profession and there are rules and regulations around it, then yes, we need to be firm on what we need. But the things that we can let go of, I think that's a good place to start.
Gemma,
I hope I've answered your question, Sean.
No, that was great. Thank you so much.
Gemma, there's another question in the chat box. There's a couple. So do you have any experience with inclusion of people with developmental disabilities, and in brackets, who are also a visible minority, and how we can encourage businesses to hire people with these barriers?
Yes, we do have experience. We have been fortunate enough as an organization to deliver training programs, and we serve individuals with multiple barriers, and sometimes those barriers are abilities. And so when we work with an employer, we know our participants extremely well, and we find out what their abilities are. And that's how we pitch them to an employer. And recently we worked with an employer in Wingham, and the employer spent time with us talking about the client that we had and what he might need to be successful. And this employer happened to have someone in his employment that worked with this individual beforehand. And that person was able, and so they matched those two individuals because there's already a connection and a knowledge of each other's personalities and work styles. And the individual, highly barriered, was able to successfully complete their placement. And now we offer a 2-week placement. I will say the story doesn't continue. I would say there is success in it because the individual stayed with the job for the full 2-week period. But then after the 2-week period on assessment, it was just too much of a busy environment for them. And then again, really recognizing how their abilities were able to match the jobs, I feel like that was a success, because it is a success when we can say this isn't going to be successful for either of us, the employer or me as a worker. And we will work with that individual to try to get them a better suited employer. But yes, individuals, I think employers need to think about what parts of the job might you be able to carve away and have other people do those functions and have the person perform with the functions that they have. And at our annual general meeting back in September, and we're going to post these videos very soon, we had someone who had an acquired brain injury, and he works in a dental office and he does very specific things. They've created a job for him. Josh is his name. And Josh speaks about how he loves where he works because he gets to do what he's really good at. But while he was there, one of the things they noticed is he's really good at calming the patients. So people who have anxiety around being at the dentist. And so suddenly he is now the greeter and he helps calm people down with his demeanor. And isn't that something to find out, that you can have someone who calms people down when they come into your office? So we have to eyes wide open in this, looking for those places where we can really have success with people that don't have the full abilities that we might need, but have some abilities that we can definitely use. And I think it brings value to people's lives when we do things like that.
Thank you, Gemma. We have a shared experience that has came into the chat as well, and I just want to flag. I came from China. I worked in United States and China for many years. When I applied for my first job in Canada, the employer told me they were looking for someone who had a Canadian experience. So as you were talking about earlier. And we also have another question as well that came in. And it says, what are safe and respectful self-reflection questions to use to help us realize and challenge our normality in our workplace?
I think question everything. And here's I'll give you an example. So in my office, we deal with our training. we have to make decisions around who would be allowed in our program, how we might support those individuals. And so a decision came to my office, and when I say my office, for me to make a decision. And we talked about it, and the program coordinator came to me and we talked about what should we put in place. And I said, okay, here's a plan of action I think will work. And we talked through that. And at the end of the conversation, the project coordinator looked at me and she said, I have a question for you. And I said, okay, fire away. And she says, if this were anybody else in our program, would you make the same decision? And I thought, no, I didn't. But you know what was really amazing about that question? It made me stop and really think about that decision that I made just seconds ago. If it were anybody else in our service delivery as a client, would I have made that decision? And my answer was yes. I said, because what we're looking at is, what is the circumstances around that person and how do we support the individual? And the reason why that person asked me that is because it was an immigrant. And isn't that a good question to have? Like, you're making this decision based on an experience as an immigrant and your knowledge as an immigrant, and you know how hard it is sometimes that immigrants experience in the workplace or in training or other things that people have talked about in that study. And now here you are making a decision. Is it the right one? And did you make it for all the right reasons? And I loved being questioned that way. So I think that's what we have to do when we make decisions. Make sure that it's a decision. If it were anyone else sitting in front of us, would we use the same system of making that decision? If the answer is yes, then I think we are on our way to making all of the right moves. I do want to point out that as we were getting ready for today, I visited a website. It's from the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus. So they serve our region as well. And they have a questionnaire that they have on their website. So Joelle, I will provide you the link because I did keep it up on my website. I thought it was like beautiful. I can't believe this is a great resource. So I will share that out. And it's a series of questions as you prepare for, it talks about immigrants. But I would suggest that if you remove the word immigrant and you talk about diversity, if you ask the question around diversity in its entirety, I think you can come up with some really good responses and see where you might have to do some work, because, you know, as good as we all are, there's always work to be done, right? We're never at the point where we have done everything we can. So I think it's really important to explore that, and I will share that with you, Joelle.
Gemma, may I ask a question? It's Sonia from United Way, and I build a lot of marketing pieces for our organization, and I'm trying to be more conscious to be visually inclusive. But can you help me? Can you walk through like your mind path on like what percentage to use or what's a good image to use, and to avoid tokenism? Like how do I look more diverse, but not perpetuate stereotypes? So for example, a lot of our images will say, this is their story, and I use a stock photo to represent the story. And if I put, you know, a non-white person in that image, am I perpetuating that, you know, immigrants are the ones that are facing all the problems?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just help me? Can you unpack that for me and help me improve to make better decisions?
Sonia, that's a fantastic question. And I don't know that there's a percentage, but what I do for the 4-county labor market planning board, we put out a lot of reports and a lot of imagery around the information that we collect. So let's be clear. If the imagery is very specific, so if we're talking about recently, actually coming up in February, we will be releasing our COVID impact on women in the workforce study. We're not going to have any men or in the imagery of that particular document. It doesn't make sense. But what we might have is an Asian woman or and it's not always going to be one stock photo. So what we try to do is give a good representation of people who are in our community. And so if you visit, Sonia, our website, you might see what we do. I couldn't tell you what percentages are because marketing is not my suit, but what I do make sure that as an organization, when we put it out, that we reflect diversity in our imagery. So if it's when we talk about our training programs, we may have a group of people, and our group of people may be an older Caucasian man and a younger Asian woman, or, you know, we have youth, we have persons with disabilities, we have a plethora of different images that people see how they fit into that community. And sometimes it's not just about representing who's already there, because if you're doing imagery that you want to attract people, then I need to see myself in that community. So it's not a bad idea. We've got some marketing now that we have out for our program, and they're billboards, and it's one person on the billboard. So how do you do that? Well, so we chose 3 different images for the billboard. We have an older Caucasian man, we have a younger brown skinned woman, and a Caucasian woman. And there are no faces on there, just, you know, the heads, and we say your face here, because we want people to imagine themselves having success with the program. And so far, we've got some really good feedback. So I think, Sonia, you'll come to the right answer because you've asked the question and you're thinking about it. You're fully aware of doing that well. The other thing I can offer you is to speak to our graphic designer in our office, and she is amazing at being able to think about what could fit our community. Did that help, Sonia?
Yes. Just to always use more and diverse photos, and yeah, I will connect with your colleague.
Yeah, it'll be Dana, and I can put you in touch with her for sure. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? And we're done. No, I'm just kidding. I thought you said we were starting. So I'm going to move the frame now back over here so I can see my presentation. Okay, so let's get going. Let's talk about, and of course, that's not the only time you can ask questions. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. And if you have a question about what's on the screen right now, you know, we talk about that. And if you want to keep it for a little bit later in our discussion, absolutely, you can do that. One of the things that we wanted to talk about, and why is this so important for us to be talking about this right now? We have and have had for the last 10 years a chronically low unemployment rate. That means we don't have all the people in our community to fill all the jobs that we have advertised. So this is just the annual release, and I should have actually updated this slide. I apologize to you for that. We're back down to 4, you know, under sub 5 unemployment rates for our region. And for the last decade, we've had those sub 5, sometimes sub 3 unemployment rates on a regular basis. What this means is that we have jobs that are going unfilled. And what it also means, thinking outside the box, is we may have people in our region that are not actively looking for work right now, but that could fill some of those positions that we need to have filled. So thinking about how we market, how we train, how we integrate people into our workplaces could be a good place for employers to start talking about how they are open to hiring local residents. And, you know, just offering what type of training would you offer to somebody who's never worked before, and those types of concepts, because we've got a lot of people that are in our community that they don't show up on this stat because they're actually not actively looking for work. They're capable. They may not have the skills you might be looking for, but with a little bit of training, they could probably gain those skills. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we do through our Connect to Skills program, but all the other programs that are offered in our community, Conestoga Career Center, Partners for Employment in Perth County. We've got Centers for Employment and Learning in Huron County and Conestoga Career Center. So you've got trainers available to provide these services to you free of charge. And so as employers, try to tap into that availability of a local workforce, because I think when you do availability of a local workforce and you also talk about how you attract people to the region to fill those jobs, then I think you've got a good blend. When we hear people talk about individuals coming to a region and taking our jobs, it's because we might not have considered the skills that they might have. And we want to make sure that people know we're looking at all the opportunities in our region to fill those jobs as well. So think outside the box when you're thinking about that. But these chronically low unemployment rates will continue to plague our employers. And recently, of course, in some of the research we've been doing, we see that women have exited the workforce in droves during the pandemic because of dependent care and home, schooling at home and all of those things that demand their attention. And so we've seen that exodus of women outside of the workplace, and we need to think about how we're going to re-engage them. So just something to think about, and how are we doing that, and how will we successfully do that? So I wanted to kind of talk about the baggage, and I think we kind of talked about this a little bit about the norms. The baggage is defined as tangible things, feelings, and circumstances or beliefs that get in our way. And if we really believe something, then we're not going to give people or that situation a chance. And so how do we react? So questions we can ask ourselves: do you have the same reaction to members of the given group each time you encounter them? So as an example, Trinis, I'm one, so I can talk about this. Trinis are always late, right? Oh, Caribbean people. So I'm from the West Indies, and that's the idea. We are a party island, I can tell you that. And so people might say that Trinis are always late. Am I ever late? Yes. When in my mind, it's not as important to be there on time. So if I'm going to my brother's and he says, come there for 3 o'clock, and I get there at 3:30, 4 o'clock, hey, no big deal. But if I'm going to this meeting, I'm logging on early and I'm making sure I'm there and I'm making sure I'm prepared. That's my personality. It has nothing to do with where I was born or the kind of culture I grew up with. And so, but if we go in with baggage and biases, somebody might say, okay, we're going to tell Gemma the meeting starts at 9:30. So she'll be there to 9:45. And we know we can get started at 10 on time, right? Rather than giving, and so we do that. And is that what we're saying here? Is that what we're doing when we work with individuals, that we think we know how they are going to operate? And so ask ourselves, do I have the reactions before or after I've had a chance to know the individual? And that's where we can remove some of those stereotypes and biases that we might bring without even knowing it. If we question, why am I doing this? We may get the answers. So a stereotype is a conventional systemic and oversimplified notion, opinion, or image of a group of people or groups of people. And the bias is a preference on or an inclination, especially one that inhibits impartial judgment. So we're already judging based on, and we have expectations without even meeting the individual. And I have a list here of just generalizations. So the idea around this particular list is generalizations we're going to use as an observation for a group or an individual or a situation. And the stereotypes are when it's negatively implied or applied. So when we say, we focus on the observation. So what we've observed is this. So the last 3 times I've met with Gemma, or we've had meetings, Gemma's been late, or she's been like, just 5 minutes before the meeting. So have a conversation. Let's talk about, what's going on, instead of saying this is what she'll do without even knowing, what's happening. So it's about the observation. It's using those general characteristics as a way of functioning. So, what do people like, and how will I treat them so they feel important in my presence? And we're not trying to fix people. We're trying to work with what you bring to the table and the strengths that people bring to the table. So using this list here, I won't go through everything on the list, but when we use the observations as a guide to people's general expectations or behaviors, then it becomes useful information to how we might be able to function. So it's when we talk about how we greet individuals, and we talk about different ways of greeting individuals from different groups and cultures. We talk about how we might be able to apply that. So just a list for us to keep in mind. So here's another part for your input. And I think this is really important for us to ask the question around why bother discussing the workplace diversity and inclusion in the first place? Why is this so important for us to be doing? Like, come on, we're many of us here are successful already. Why is this important? And the second question, hey, stop doing that, is what might be some of the fears and concerns people have about workplace diversity and inclusion? So let's hear it. What do you think? You can either answer both questions, you can answer one, you don't have to answer at all. Are there any things coming up in the chat? And if you've got something to say, just go ahead. I think Joelle says that we can't see everyone on the screen, so just go ahead and unmute yourself and say, let's make your comment. I mean, am I right when I heard Ryan say 2 o'clock, Joelle?
Oh, no.
I was like, oh, okay. I didn't think so. But yeah, why is this important? Why are we going to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours talking about this? Why does this even make sense for us to spend that time talking about this? And maybe I'll start with you, Joelle. Why did you think that this was a good idea to talk about this?
Oh, I think it's always a good idea to talk about this. And it's surprising me that it's taken so long for us to talk about this. So I think it's the right time in that we have a need to fill. And so people become more interested. So I think this has created this sort of the right ingredients for the conversation and the readiness to actually do something. So it's exciting, right? We've got incredibly talented people here that that can make a huge difference in our communities. And so it's exciting. It's an exciting time for us to do this and to do it as well, and recognize that we're going to learn and make mistakes and, and do better all the time. So I think that's a little bit about where I'm coming from. I noticed that Sean has indicated white people are afraid it will take opportunities away from them.
Yeah. And Joelle, it's always, now is the right time because we're doing it now. And I always think of myself, I think of whatever happens, why didn't that happen before? And then I remind myself, now's the time for that to happen. It didn't happen before because things weren't in place for it to happen before. So it's perfect timing now. And the fears absolutely around, and the discussion around people taking jobs. I know I've got so many examples of that. but the idea is that if we were to deal, and here's why people think that, if my son or daughter has been sitting at home looking for a job and not being hired and things just aren't working out for them, and then we see this community push on bringing new people to our region and bringing new people in, but nobody's really dealing with the concerns of our local residents, whether it's transportation, training, whatever that looks like. If people aren't focused on those things as well, we absolutely create a divide. And as an immigrant, I would say that I've seen that happen where we talk about, and it's not the same thing as having a call to hire. And, Gemma, out of 85 applicants, when I was hired as the administrative assistant at the board 20 years ago, I was the person they chose out of 85 applicants because my supervisor at the time said, you bring some skills that I can see can move this organization forward. And so I was very grateful. but that's how we want to make decisions. But if we constantly don't hire the people in our community because we deem them as we've known them and they've been the normal, whatever we call it, they haven't been productive in the community, and then we go out and we hire someone else for that same job that they could have filled, we do create those divides. So when I talk about growing your workforce for employers and for the work that we do, I talk about a three-pronged approach, and it's always including people who are already in our community. First, what can we do for people who live in our community? Upskilling, creating jobs that can really benefit with their skills, and then attracting, and then of course that third prong of making sure we retain people as well. I don't know your I know it's not Salison. That's not your name.
Sharon, sorry.
Oh, Sharon.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, like, over the years, right, in supporting families within the community who have children with disabilities, the children are learning the English, but there's really hardly been opportunities for parents to learn English. And I think that, if you can't get to know your neighbor, then you don't have the connections to the workforce, right? Because somebody might know somebody who would know looking for somebody, right? And I just think that, we need interpreters. We need interpreters to help families when they get in situations where their children with disabilities need services, and they need to understand the legalities of that, or be able to advocate for themselves within the hospital setting or whatever it is, and have the language to be able to meet their neighbor and reach out.
And I think, thank you very much, Sally. I know that Kristin, and through the work of the Local Immigration Partnership and being able to provide settlement services, the problem with our rural community is the challenge with our rural community has always been that critical mass is what dictates what services you get in your community. We don't have critical mass for some of the services that we absolutely need to help integrate and make people a part of our community. So, but with the good work that we've had happening with the Local Immigration Partnership, thank goodness we have access to some of those settlement services, and we absolutely need to see more. But I'll give you an example of how a little bit outside the box we can think. So in our program, we serve individuals from anywhere within our region. They have to fill jobs within our region. And so we had an individual who was a refugee, is a refugee, and with a work permit, and came to our training. And we were concerned about language. We were concerned that assimilating and learning the materials that they needed to be safe in the workplace may not be happening. And so they did well. We had one of their sponsors came to class with them, helped them through some of the materials. But once they went out to the hands-on training, we thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? Well, that person has been using, the Google Translate. They went through all of the certification training, and it was, and I spoke to the trainer. I visited the site and spoke to the trainer the one day, and, we kind of had a side conversation, and he said, I cannot believe how well he's doing. He got 90 and 95% in all of his tests so far, passed everything. He's gone off to work with an employer, and he's successfully integrated into that workplace. And he uses his phone as a tool to communicate. And it's funny, every time we follow up with the employer, he says, he doesn't stop. If he doesn't get the answer he needs, he doesn't stop communicating. And that's one of the things, of course, the employer loves with him, because he is going to be safe in the workplace. So in the face of the challenge that we have, not enough services in our region, what can individuals or groups of people do to tackle the problem? And there's one up, and it has been a successful integration into the workplace. And one of the things that I can say has been done extremely well. Safety is on point. He's passed all of his exams, and he doesn't have a really strong handle of the English language. So, but he has a lot of knowledge and experience in the field from his previous homeland. So we can so there's not a lot of learning in the field he has to do. It's learning how to communicate in Canada, and that's positive. So think about those kinds of things. They may not be the best tools, but they certainly help people move along in that regard for communications. And conversation cafes, having a cute little conversation cafe in your community, it should be it could be all volunteer based, and you just talk have people talk and ask questions about what's happening and where should I go, and have those places very safe and comfortable. There's no right thing, wrong thing, just ask whatever you need to know. And I think that's a second opportunity for us to really kind of work within our means and make things happen and prove that we need those services in our region. And some of the fears are that people are taking the jobs, but if I was going unfilled for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, then we have to look at that and go, okay, we need to find people to fill those jobs, right? So, so yeah, lots of ways. I'll give employers one example of how I was hired when I was a nanny, and think of the trust someone would have to put in me. My first 3 jobs were horrendous. It was not a good experience for me. But my tenacious personality was, I was not going back to Trinidad without success. And so I kept going and I kept going. And so my last job, I went for an interview and I said to this woman who is a single parent with 1 child. And I say to her, I don't have someone that I can give you as a reference, because obviously if I've had 3 bad jobs, I've got 3 bad references. And she looked at me and she says, give me the names anyway, because I will be able to tell if it's a performance issue or a personality issue. And I can work with personality issues, right? And of course, she called me back, she called them. And of course, the reference, you know, and, but she hired me and she gave me my first opportunity in Canada. And I'd already been here about 2 years. So you can imagine how frustrating it was. I worked with her for about 1.5 years, and an open work permit. I was able to go out and do other things. Finally, I married my family and moved on, and that, you know, moved on and did some other things. But giving that opportunity, that very first opportunity, find loyalty that you find anywhere. And so sometimes it may look bad on a resume. If you can see past some of that and give somebody a chance, you might end up with a very loyal, hardworking employee. And we were still friends today. My little guy is 30-something years old, little guy, 30-something years old, and we are still really good friends today. And of course, the other people I know where. Kind of opportunities we can create, and it is fearful when you do things like that, but sometimes it can really pay off dividends. Are there any questions, comments about the question? And we can move on. And like I said, just keep asking them as we go along if you have anything to add. So what is equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace? What is that? It certainly is not tokenism. I can tell you that. And one of the things I looked at when I became the executive director of Fort County Labor Market Planning Board was, you know, the little caveat that's on postings that say we are an equal opportunity employer. I removed it because I thought we need to be an equal opportunity employer. We don't need to say we're an equal opportunity. So hope and we'll talk about the Fort County Labor Market Planning Board story a little bit later, and you can hear if we are. I don't use that in any of the ads that we do because I don't think it's relevant to say it. I think it's more important to do it. And I want to say a big thank you. This was not in the audience, but has given me some great insights in talking about the next things that I'm going to talk about. And Louise, if you're ever looking for a coach around this particular topic, Louise is phenomenal. And she's out of the London area, and she has provided me some great coaching. And you will, I've seen her facilitate some hard conversations, you know, fearful conversations, those hard conversations around diversity. She has just improved me to no end. I really like working with Louise. So that's why I put it up there. And the next few slides, I really have kind of stolen from some of her ideas that she shared with me. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I shared her name and her contact information. So when we talk about diversity, we talk about data. So when you talk about how diverse is your workforce, you're looking at how many many, what percentage of this, and this, whether it's, different categories of people in your workplace, and all the ways in which employees within your workplace differ. So that could be abilities. It could be, I can't stand for an 8-hour shift, but I can, stand for 4. Can I sit for 4? Those different types of, so that's what, when we talk about diversity, we're talking about the numbers. And I was told recently that Trinidad is the most diverse country in the world. And I'm not surprised, because you name an ethnicity, a culture, anything, if you go to Trinidad, you're going to find it there. And I didn't know that it was the #1 country for diversity, but there it is. So I'm really happy to say that, but that does not mean discrimination doesn't exist, or prejudice. Let's just also say that. So what types of differences are we really talking about? So let's start: ethnic, racial, religion, culture, race, religion, culture, ethnicities. We talk about disabilities of all kinds, of any kind, anything, cognitive, physical, mental health is becoming a disability. People are not able to function to their fullest capacity. And so we need to pay attention to that. What do we need to put in place to help people function productively? Gender, age, sexual orientation, financial or social status, anything that sets us apart from the norm is a diversity. And we need to think outside the box of just the top one, and not, we need to move 1, 3, 4 to put processes in place that completely removes discrimination, right? When we're making this decision. So, these are just a few, I'm sure there are that we can come up with. So what is workplace inclusion? And this is one of the things that we wanted, I actually thought was amazing. And this is what I learned from those micro signals that let us know that we belong in the place. And some of these words are mine, but in the place that we find ourselves. And so we have, I know I have, and I'm not unique. I'm an individual, but I'm not unique in some of my experiences. And I know that you've gone into a room or into a space or at an event where you felt that you were intruding on a group, right? That you weren't part of the conversation. And so you're trying to figure out, so how do I get to be part of this conversation? And because I'm here, like, what do I do? And, and it's really hard to kind of filter yourself in. And so the inclusionary part is where, and this is my favorite word actually, inclusion, integration. Those are the words that I love. And because when people are included, they immediately feel the value that they bring to your group, your discussion, and your room. And inclusion is the outcome of transforming that rich diversity, right? So in our workplaces through equity approaches. And so that leads us to of inclusion is that everyone brings a special perspective, and every additional perspective helps mold your product or service to be valuable to a wider audience. So when we look at diversity and bringing that whole, you are thinking about this differently. We've all heard that comment, right? Oh, we've always done it this way. And that's when we start to challenge our thinking. If you've always done it this way, it's time to change, right? Or at least look at doing something differently. And so when we bring that, all of that experience and knowledge and special perspective that people bring to our space, then we are able to create amazing outcomes with whatever we're trying to do. And so here's a bit of a story around inclusion. Exclusionary inclusion. That just came to my mind. So I don't even know if that's a thing, but I'll explain and you'll let me know. So when I worked at the University of Waterloo, I held several different jobs because I like to do different things. So in this one job, I was in a room of about 25, no, sorry, not 25. There was about 12 of us in this room. It was really all together. And I sat beside this young lady, And I can't even remember if she was my age as well. I was young then. I was young then. But anyway, and she's something, exactly what you brought up. She said, these immigrants are coming into our place and they're taking our jobs. And, you know, she's on and on and on. And she's having this rant about immigrants. And then she looks over at me and she goes, but not you. I thought to myself, so I looked at her and I said, so why not me? And she says, well, because I know you. And I said, exactly. And that's what I mean by exclusionary inclusion. And because and I said to her, I said, hey, if you're talking about immigrants, I'll have to put my hand up. I'm an immigrant. I'm working here. I apparently stole a job from somebody else who thought might have been more capable. But you can't say things like immigrants are stealing our jobs, indigenous peoples are stealing our jobs, whoever is doing something, but not you, because I know you. That it doesn't wash. So, and so I tell you that story to tell you that people are, and I don't think she was being disingenuous. I think she really believed what she was saying in her own mind, that I was okay because she knew me, but it's not okay, because you don't make decisions because you don't know people. You can't know everybody, right? And so I wanted to share that story about that inclusion piece. I was included, yay, and I could be excited about that, but I identify as an immigrant. And so my immigrant colleagues and you know, I also feel like that's where you're putting me as a person. So you know, just kind of talking about how we think about it is really important as well. And so those micro signals that let people know why they're included and how. And so you don't have to say, oh, you're included in this conversation. It just happens, and then people know. Inclusion, and this is a big one for me. It's not, I've heard this. I haven't heard it recently, but I've heard it a lot. Inclusion is not about tolerance. Don't tolerate me. You don't want me here. I don't need to be here. Right? And here's a mantra I live by, and actually it actually has caused me to leave a lot of my stress. And I heard this one from my husband. I know he heard it from someone else. I can't remember where he heard it, but it goes like this: I go where I'm celebrated, not where I'm tolerated. So if you see people all of a sudden exiting your space, and it's like, oh, I wonder how come Gemma doesn't call anymore. I wonder how come Gemma doesn't, you know, whatever. Think about that in that way. Have I given off a message of tolerance or inclusion, right? And so I love that mantra. I live by it every day. The minute I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're my sister. I don't care if you're my boss. I don't care if you're a really respected individual in the community and everybody wants to know you. If you are going to tolerate me, then you don't get the pleasure of being in my presence. That's just the way I think about it. So, and it has given me a lot of things in my life. So of course we want inclusion. We want to continue to celebrate strengths, uniqueness, and our company. Actually, I did a little bit of research last night about this because I hadn't really talked about it in this regard before. I wanted to know what people thought about were the top ideas around inclusion. So this is what I found. Every time I move my mouse, it goes back. So having a voice. When employees feel like they have a voice and they're more likely to share their opinions with others. And having a voice is not having a place where you can say things and then it not be at least acknowledged. Not everything somebody says to us we can implement in the workplace. They may have some ideas, but we have to acknowledge that they have a voice and it's respected in the workplace. The second one is belonging, a sense of into that company. I don't get up and go to work. I get up and I'm excited to be around the people that I'm going to get to be around. I'm excited about the work I'm going to do today. And this doesn't have to be research or presentations or anything. I am getting up and I'm going to make a widget. but I'm excited about getting up and going to make a widget because I have a voice at the place that I make that widget and I belong there. I am a part of a family there, and people will stay and retention will happen. The sense of uniqueness, just like an employee needs belonging and connection, they also need to feel unique pairs. So how are you doing today, Gemma? I'm doing okay. Oh, that's nice. Okay, let's go back to, or spend some time. Let's find out about that particular, why don't you feel as excited as you did yesterday? What's going on? Is there something we can help you with? And it doesn't take long to touch base with someone and say, how's it today? And really them feeling like that's the individual strength they bring because you really want them to be there. The next one is feeling valued. And the value is that I want you here every day. So what can I do to help you be here every day? And that value we place on the workforce that we get to work with, then we are able to help develop that confidence. People get up more excited about showing up. A learning and development environment. What can I learn today? Let's create opportunities. So it's not just the supervisors that are learning, or my colleagues that are learning and I don't get an opportunity. Let's talk about how, and that doesn't have to be big, expensive training and learning. It could be as simple as, let's talk about inclusion today, 10 minutes. Let's learn something. Let's learn how we might be able to do it differently. And so we have 8, and a collaborative environment. When somebody is not feeling well, when somebody's down a little bit, that the rest of the team is saying, hey, come on, let's go. How can we get you up there again? Because we know how we can work together. So we've had someone who's been testing positive for COVID, I think for like 2 weeks now. And so of course she can't come back to work and she hasn't been feeling well. And so, she reaches out every day. We kind of figure out where she's at. And then yesterday she felt well enough. She picked up her computer and I said, go back home. If you can work, by all means, go ahead and work. And you should see the messages in our internal Slack. When she was online, it was like the world was just right again. And all the staff were messaging and it's like, oh, it's so good that you're back and can't wait to see you. And, all of that. And she knew right away of all these things. She belonged and people missed her, but she doesn't have a mountain of work that she's come back to because people have chipped in. What can I do? What can I do to help out? Because if she can't do it, we've got to get it done, and that collaborative approach. Access to resources. What is it that we offer? That we offer everyone. And, whether it's benefits or, an employee assistance program, whatever it is, does everybody have access to those resources they need to be successful? And then strategic alliance. The strategic alliance requires companies to explain why an inclusion in the workplace is important. And so some of the things that we had talked about based on Kristin and Mark's research is that whole 53.2% of people feeling that negativity from their supervisors and their coworkers. That strategic alignment, managers setting that up in place, understanding and letting people know why this is important to the company. This is not important to you as an individual. This is important to the company. And guess what? You are a family member. You're a part of this company. And so this is what we're going to do about this. And I think this will help really solidify your workforce, and it will become more of a family than it already is. So as we move into equity, so now we've done diversity, we've done inclusion, equity. And I put them in this order because inclusion actually rolls into that equitable piece. So the equity piece is how organizational procedures and practices, decision-making processes, culture and relationships promote inclusion. That last piece that we just talked about, nice segue. It's about how power shows up in our organizations. Is it okay for supervisors to do something different than the rest of us, right? And it's about who can access the resources. So a co-worker comes and says, I'm really having a hard time with my Indigenous co-worker. And how are we going to deal with that as an organization? Does that one staff person have access to learning and knowledge growth and as everyone else in the organization. And I remember once we had an in-class session, and we had an older gentleman and an Indigenous youth. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, we don't know what it is, they started butting heads like crazy. And there was this conflict that was happening. And of course, you can't learn when you're in a conflict, situation. And so our staff pulled them each in and talked about what was happening. And it turns out that it was just a pure misunderstanding. Somebody was disgruntled about something that was happening in their life. They were muttering. Someone else in the same space thought it was about them. And once they talked it through, we were able to move on and have a really great partnership in that class and collaborative approach. But if we had left it unchecked, one person, either one of them, would have left our training and said, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with this. This isn't working out. And we could have seen them both fail. And so we wanted to make sure that we deal with that up front and talk about what the problems are. So access to resources, whether it's just talking about it or anything else that kind of helps address the situation. So, how do we make decisions around promotions and perks that other people get and some people don't? And once you see that happening, we need to have that check in place. Why is this happening? What's going on in my psyche? Why am I doing this? Why am I making that decision? Fix it, right? And because people see that, we don't have to say things, people see it. So here's a little, I've dissected this picture. You may have seen this picture before, but I've dissected it for a reason. So here's an equitable employer. I provide equality. So everybody has a box, right? However, the purpose isn't the box. The purpose is we want everybody to see the game. But little guy down here isn't seeing the game. Let me move my mouse. I think you can see my mouse now. So little guy in the purple shirt here, he's looking through a crack. He can probably barely see the pitcher's mound, right? And the expectation is that he's enjoying the game as much as the rest of us, because, well, that'll be me actually. I won't be able to see over the fence. If people know me, I have a very short stature. But this is equality. This is what we talk about, what we think about when we say, well, everybody gets the same thing. Everybody gets the same treatment, but here's the difference. Here's what equity does. So equity is where we provide the resources to the individuals that need it and when they need it. So here we have everyone enjoying the game rather than everybody having a box, but not everybody being part of the experience. And so when we think about this particular thing and how equality is not the same as equity, we can start really thinking outside the box and creating really supportive workplaces. Joelle, please make sure that I'm on time. I like to talk, so, and I don't have a clock today.
Yeah, we're in almost that wrap up time,
okay.
Gemma. Yeah,
so I'm almost done because I can wrap up very quickly with our story. So the one thing that I do want you to talk, I wanted to bring this part. So we talk about JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. That's what we talk about at the Workforce Planning Board. So I wanted to introduce this piece, workplace justice. And it's about dismantling those systems and structures that create inequity or equity or equality, right? I wanted to say equality because of the chat. It's replacing them with the systems that promote fairness and creating opportunities for diverse groups of people to thrive. So what I would like to leave you with, and I'm not wrapping up yet, I have a story I want to share with you. The justice part is the part that kind of envelops everything that you're working towards. It's taking the diversity, working it into inclusion, and doing that, the equity, diversity, inclusion, the equity piece, the equality piece, and then moving that into justice. And when we create a system that allows justice in our workforce, without question, you're going to have a successful integration of every culture, group, category of diversity that you could ever think about. And so in essence, justice is the product of creating diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplaces in the community. And this is what we want to strive towards, that justice piece. That makes my heart, that warms my heart. So quickly, our story. 20 years ago, I was hired as the administrative assistant, and I was told by my supervisor at that time, and there was just two of us, and she said to me, I can see you going places, but you need to do this. She coached me like amazing. And then, so 20 years ago, 2002, here I am working away, doing my thing as the administrative assistant. And today, I think, I don't know, 11, 12, maybe 12 to 15 years, maybe I've been the executive director. I can't remember now. But today, we have an immensely diverse workforce. And we have, in our workforce, we have newcomers, like somebody that landed in Canada and we hired them 2 months after they were landed. And not because we were searching for that person. I was looking for a data clerk, and this person had experience in their former country working at a bank. And I thought, I need this person. This person knows how to pay attention to detail, and I need that person. A person was hired in 2019, 2020, no, maybe 2020. They moved in January of 2020, and they're still working with us. I've hired individuals who were working on their permanent residency status. So they were a student, they worked with us because of the employment at the 4 County Labour Market Planning Board. As researchers, I've done that. We've done this twice now. We've been able to help them become permanent residents in Canada, and just doing amazing work for our organization. We have Indigenous, Métis individuals on our staff. We have, of course, immigrant, we've got it all. Male, young, older, and and everything in between. And it is not because we went after a token representation of any group or category of people. What we did is we looked at individuals with their resumes and thought about how the skills that they brought would actually fit with what we needed to have happen. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had about 3 individuals in our 13 staff repertoire say to me, and I said that word wrong, I know, but it's my accent. But they've said to me, Gemma, I cannot believe that you gave me a chance when I didn't have the qualifications. And there's one individual that started working with us in 2009, and she's still with us because my growth career trajectory in Canada has always been someone gave me a chance. Someone believed enough in me, and I grabbed onto that belief, and I was able to do something with it. And if I can do that for one person in my career as a manager where I'm able to make decisions, then I'm happy to do that. So sometimes it's not always about the experience, the hard experience that people bring. We're not brain surgeons, we're not physicians, we are not engineers, but we can learn to do this. I learned to be an executive director. I didn't even know what this was until I became an executive director. So I say that to say that when you look at individuals, remove the concepts that will cause you to be not diverse, and cause you to be hiring token, because people feel that, they know it, they won't stay with you long. They might take a job to have experience so they can put that on their resume to move on, but they won't stay with you very long. And what you want to do is make sure that if you're putting on all of these efforts, you want to make sure that you also have retention. There's no point in spending all this time recruiting and then you don't have a retention plan. So there's more that I can share, of course, but our time is up. I hope I've been of some value to you in the time that I've had with you, because I'd hate to waste your time. And thank you very much. So Joelle, I think it's back to you.
I'm just looking to see if Ryan's going to jump in.
Go ahead, Joelle, it's fine.
Oh, Okay, okay, great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Libro and thank you to investStratford. Thank you to Kristin Crane and Mark Nonkes and to Gemma Mendez Smith and to all of you. This is incredible conversation that we're able to have, and we appreciate the participation that we've had and all of your time. It's very precious these days, and we're really thankful to have you here with us. So thank you very much. We do have a next, our next presentation is a month from now, so stay tuned for that. And have a wonderful day, everyone.